Welcome, everybody. We're going to be getting started in just a second here. It takes a little time to get folks to make the switch over.
So we ready to go?
We're in the main room.
Thanks to all the folks still joining in. I'm seeing we're up over 400 now, and that number is still climbing. So I'm going to give it another minute as folks continue to trickle in. Okay, I think we've reached enough of a quorum now. Thanks everybody for showing up tonight. My name is Alex Craven. I'm a staff member with Sierra Club and a board member of the Save Our Wild Salmon Coalition. I'm honored to be sharing the Zoom screen tonight with a number of esteemed Indigenous leaders, including Children of the Setting Sun Productions, Chairwoman Francis Charles, Amy Cordalis, and wanted to just say that y'all are in for a real treat for this screening of Our Sacred Obligation, and that we're really eager to bring this film to the audience that we work most with. And so I want to say a quick thanks to the co-hosts of the event, including Save Our Wild Salmon Coalition, Defenders of Wildlife, Idaho Conservation League, and Washington Conservation Action. And with that, I will pass it over to Anton George and Pat Liss from the West Shore Canoe family.
welcome everybody to this time together, this time that we're thankful to the Sierra Club and Save Our Wild Salmon people for doing this. Special Aishka to Alex for being so diligent and helping us bring us together, this time together tonight. Although it's using technology, we hope to reach the hearts and minds of many more people that we feel need to be included in this really important work of freeing up those rivers that contain so much life for salmon, for all living things, especially those young ones that are going to pass on the knowledge that we carry today and will continue to carry into the future. So I have introductions here. First off, our beloved leader from Lower Elwha Klallam, Chairwoman Francis Charles. And next to me, former Chairman of the Lummi Nation, Julius, who was our leader during the fight to prevent a coal port being built at Cherry Point. Both Chairwoman Francis and Chairman Julius were successful in those efforts. And third, Amy Cordalis from the Yurok Nation, who's stepping in front of a lot of the legal and political and administrative details around their most recent victory of removing 4 dams from the Klamath River. And so we hold our hands up to each one of these leaders, and tonight we'll have Amy open our film tonight. She's located on the East Coast, and I know for me that would be way past my bedtime. I don't know what it's like for her, but Amy, we're so happy that you're here, and we're really thankful to you and your family that you can join us tonight and open up our film in a good way. So Siam Nostalgia Haishka.
Well, Ayakui, Waklau, thank you for that introduction. Neknau, Amy Cordalis, Nuwak Rekwa, Numatewa, Waklau. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here with all of you tonight, even if we're in this virtual setting. It's important we gather and we hear these stories and at least can be together in a way to I don't know, share and learn. And I want to raise my hands and give thanks to the Setting Suns Productions and also to the Salmon People Project for including the Yurok Tribe, including me in their very important work. You know, they came to us a while ago and said, we want to unite the Salmon nations and tell the story of the Salmon people. And for a long time, you know, Yurok knew that that work was needed. We've been marginalized and separated as Indigenous peoples, and the work that the Salmon People Project is doing is putting us back together. And that's a critical step of recovering from colonization and rebuilding our nations, asserting our treaty rights, rebuilding our cultures, and rebuilding our ecosystems. So tonight, all of you join us in that effort and hearing the message that we bring to you all. And I couldn't be more thrilled, even though it's late here tonight, to be here with all of you and to be a part of this project. Where I want to start is to kind of take it home a little bit to the Klamath River. We are in a really interesting, really complicated time on the Klamath River. You know, and I hope folks here know a little bit about us. We're, you know, Klamath River is in Northern California. It's the, you know, the Yurok Tribe is, our reservation is located on the lower 45 miles either side of the river. That's our Aboriginal territory. We've never been, you know, removed. We've always been there. My family, we've been at the village of Rekwa, right at the north side of the river since time immemorial. So we've always been there. but things have changed a lot over the last 170 years in ways that were beyond our control. 4 dams were built on the river in the mid-Klamath between 1912 and 1964. Moving up the river, there's one of the largest federal reclamation projects in Oregon that was built in 1905. And essentially through, the construction of the Klamath Reclamation Project, the construction of the dams, the river was colonized. And it wasn't just the indigenous people that went through colonization. The river was also colonized. And the way that the river has been managed for the last 170 or so years also reflects the values of the colonizer, which essentially means that the river has been used in a way that has been seen as a thing that can be exploited, a thing that can be used, and a thing too, right? Like, notice that language. Not a person, not something with a spirit, rather a thing. And essentially what has happened is that, the river and its resources has been allowed to be used to support an extractive economy. And that has led to the destruction of our river and our salmon runs. Right now, we have about 3 to 5% of the historical salmon runs left on our river. The Klamath River used to be the 3rd largest salmon producing river in the entire lower 48 continental states. We're down to 3 to 5% of those historical runs. And what that has meant for our tribal fisheries is, our treaty rights, our federally reserved rights have essentially been annihilated. We haven't had a meaningful salmon run in probably 10 or so years. We haven't had a meaningful commercial fishery in 10 or so years. We've had a very dismal subsistence fishery in that same amount of time. But beyond that, the river's really sick. Every year, about August, September, even into July, when it's hot and when we used to go down the river and we would camp and we would fish and we would swim in the river and we would just be there. Now the water's too toxic to even get in. And during those times, that's also when some of the biggest salmon runs used to come home. But my grandma, for example, she won't even eat those fish that come in when the river is toxic because she thinks they're too, harmful to her well-being. And that's a real tragedy for a woman who's, she's 87 now and has spent her whole life on the river eating salmon. She won't even eat them anymore. So that's what's happening. Meanwhile, though, there's hope, right? Dam removal is on the horizon. In November, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission approved the removal of 4 dams on the Klamath River in what will be the largest dam removal project in history. That was the final federal approval we needed to move forward with dam removal. And now we're expecting that those dams will be removed by the end of December of 2024. So that is on the horizon, and we have followed the leadership of Chairwoman Francis up at the Elwha. She paved the way and showed us that dam removal is possible. And so we're following her trail. We're following her upriver. And hopefully, joining her in a free-flowing river in a couple of years here. And so it's so there's this great hope and there's this great, progress. But also, meanwhile, we are still in the heat of the water wars. We celebrated dam removal with Secretary Holland and the governors of Oregon and California. And then it was actually 12 hours later, the Bureau of Reclamation announced a plan to cut river flows 30% below what is required by the Coho biological opinion under the Endangered Species Act. And right now, in the river, right this instant, the Endangered Species Act is being violated, and there are baby salmon that are dying. We are literally going through death by 1,000 reds. You know, the little reds, you know, the baby eggs are being stranded because there's not enough water in the river to support those fish. And that's happened because the Bureau of Reclamation at the top of the Klamath River at the headwaters, there's one of the largest, you know, federal reclamation projects in the country, and the Bureau diverted a bunch of water to support agriculture. And as a result, there's not enough water for Endangered Species Act that support, or excuse me, Endangered Species Act salmon that also support the tribal treaty rights throughout the river. So, you know, we are still very much experiencing the sort of, you know, tragedy of our time, which is this ecological crisis. Today in this movie, you're going to hear a lot about Yurok's history and what we've gone through. You're going to learn more about what I just spoke to. But what I hope you really take away is this understanding of our view of what the river is and why we fight to restore the river. And we fight because we are here on this earth, because the Creator put us here to protect this river, to protect the salmon. We have the utmost privilege of being the people from the Lower Klamath River. My family for generations has benefited from this wonderful, tremendous salmon resource, the river. I can't wait to share more stories about all the fish tails and everything else that, you know, we've gone through generations, because we had that great privilege of being, you know, the Yurok people. But with that privilege comes an obligation that we also protect and steward and restore the river. And so now we're in a time where that other piece of it, the obligation, the sacred obligation, comes into play, where we have to step up and protect that river. And that's why we advocate for dam removal. That's why we advocate to heal the river. That's why we advocate to, you know, protect the salmon. And so I hope, you know, through the film, you know, when it's over, you can reflect on your own obligations. And even if you're not a person, an Indigenous person, even if you're not, you know, connected to a particular place, you all have your home waters. You all have a connection to a river, a stream. You have a connection to a fish or some kind of creature that is connected to water. You know, so I hope you can think about what is your obligation to that resource and how do you exercise that. You know, and then I hope that you'll continue to participate in, you know, the Salmon People Project, get involved with other work. I recently launched a new nonprofit. It's called the Ridges to Riffles Indigenous Conservation Fund. And our goal is to, you know, continue the work that we've done on the Klamath with the Yurok, and fighting for tribal treaty rights and providing tribes with, you know, technical and legal services that they need to advance tribal cultural natural resource issues. And so there's a lot of ways that you can engage in these kinds of issues. And so I'm thrilled you're here tonight. I'm thrilled you're here to listen and to learn more. And just really wanted to express a lot of gratitude. And I think that you know, the bright light and the hope for the future is really just the intention you have expressed by being here, which is to learn more and then to think about how you can use your own life force to protect these interests and to exercise your own sacred obligation. So with that, I'll say Wak Lao, and I think I'm the last speaker before the show starts. So grab your popcorn, get cozy, and I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you.
Oh, Oh, Elwha atau. Ana kus klag ma pawiana weta pawata atau kus he.
Yurok people have always been on the Klamath River. The creator made the land, made the water, made the animals, made the plants and the trees, and then made the humans last and said, this is all here for you, and I've made it for you. And if you take care of it, if you live in balance with all of this, you will never want for anything. You will always have enough. We said, all right, we'll be the protectors. It was a cultural covenant to protect all the things that we rely on. About 200 years ago, white people came. And since then, we've been going through colonization. We've always been fishing people. We fish the same family of fish today that our family has always fished for. It's the same run. Those same salmon always call us home, and they give us place and they give us purpose. In 1855, the Yurok Reservation was created. We were supposed to have reserved our Aboriginal rights to continue our fishing way of life, to continue that exercise of that cultural covenant. But meanwhile, about 1902, and at the top part of the river, the feds authorized one of the largest federal reclamation projects in the whole country. They essentially took the headwaters of the river and completely redid the plumbing. They drained the wetlands, they moved the riverbeds. They did all these things to essentially create this land for agriculture. In the middle part of the river, they built 4 dams without fish ladders. The lowest dam is called Iron Gate, and that is literally what it is from the salmon's perspective. There's no fish ladder, there's no way for it to get past that Iron Gate. The river was colonized, the fish were colonized, the people were colonized, and all of that essentially was happening through like the 1960s.
Water is a prime necessity without which the nation cannot prosper.
In that time, the agricultural project up the river, which is called the Klamath Reclamation Project, expanded, and they wanted more and more water. And so they kept diverting more and more water out of the river. In the 90s, that's when we started seeing the salmon runs really start to decline in a real significant way. The fish were just never going to make it. The river was never going to make it. We have that great privilege of living from the salmon, but along with that privilege comes that duty of stewardship. I always think about that original agreement we made with the Creator. It was a cultural covenant to protect all the things that we rely on. What's interesting, I think, about being a Yurok now is that we exercise that duty. Our modern tribal government is charged with putting the weight of its sovereignty behind enforcing that caretaker role. And we use our own traditional knowledge, our ecological knowledge, and we sort of marry that with modern science and law and policy, and that's been our approach to river restoration.
In 1994, we created the Yurok Tribe. So once we create our own constitution and our own form of government, that established us to have water right. And through trial and error and resiliency, through court and through treaties, it proved that we had a senior water right that was well established before the development of the Klamath Basin Irrigation District. Our water rights, our dam removal, this is all a lifetime of work. We need those dams out of here. If we want to restore our river to a natural state, then we need those out of there. That's going to give our salmon the best opportunity to survive.
We're about 6 miles up from the Elwha mouth. This location itself was what we called the lower dam. Behind it was a lake. A lot of the water had covered what we're looking at right now that was underwater. We would see a big pool of water that was below the dam. The fish was just mingling around in the pool, trying to make their way up past the dams. After the dam started being released, this was the first place we seen that first salmon make its path across their blockage.
So when they first started working on the dams, our people did their best to speak up as loud as they could. We told them the salmon are going to die. But to speak up back then, it was useless. Nobody listened back then to Native people. It was like we were not here. The colonization of our people, the dams are a part of that colonization. That is what brought in all the new settlers. So it changed us dramatically. We lost all our songs. We lost our language. And the dams just was another thing to add to kill our spirit.
We were the original environmentalists and we were the original managers.
The resistance never died. It kept on and on. Eventually, people started understanding, and then people started buying in. The people started wanting to be part of the movement. People wanted to better the Elwha, and they want our salmon runs, the wild salmons, to come back. I always wondered, what would that be like, to witness the dams come down? Is it going to really change us? Are we just going to be the same? And it actually lit our light in our spirit, all of us. I hope and pray that the Elwha River flourishes with many, many salmon. But our people have agreed not to fish the Elwha River until we see better numbers.
We're on the Elwha River, and our job is to ID the fish, count them, and send them on their way. And we use this information to, gauge how the salmon populations in the Elwha are doing. And we're seeing a lot of good things happen on this river. And this is part of telling that story.
They come back right away, they come back and they went farther out the river. It was one of the biggest moments, to keep asking, how far are they going? How far are they going? Oh, this one's up there about 50 miles. Dang. We're within a mile of a couple of places where I know that just loads up every year with salmon now.
With dam removal, we've seen this place just skyrocket in terms of fish productivity. We've gone from no salmon to having a thriving population of Chinook, coho, steelhead, now pink salmon.
First day that lower dam was taken out was the first day we seen that salmon make that cross, and we knew that the prayers had been answered. We will see those salmon come back. We will witness the plentifulness that our elders talk about. It is still closed to any fishing, but in a couple years we are looking at opening it back up for families to be able to go back and start fishing. There was no words that could express the day when we seen that first dam being removed. There was no words. 100 years it had taken us to get those dams out. 100 years our ancestors had fought. It was the women at that time that went back to DC and fought for what we had fought for what you're fighting for right now. They told us that it would not happen, and it happened.
You paved the way.
When I think about my community in Warm Springs, when I go home, I went home for 7 years and worked for the tribe, and there were a lot of things that were broken, and I kept asking why. And when I come here along the river and I look and I see that river and I say, I'll never know what it's like to stand along that river. I can feel it. I feel it pull me, but I'll never know because that river's been silenced. Our villages were flooded, our grave sites were desecrated, our way of living was taken away. And then they ask you, why are you broken? My work around the environment, and in particular the Snake River issue, is tied to that belief of healing, of hope, of knowing that if we take care of the salmon, we take care of our relative, Waikanish, if we do that, we will be okay.
2002, I was working for the Yurok Tribal Fisheries Department. My job was to count fish, and I loved it. I was on the river all the time. I was talking to the people. I was counting fish. It was fantastic. September comes around, big run of fall Chinook salmon, like beautiful big salmon. At the top of the Klamath River, there's this huge irrigation project. It was a drought year, and so they diverted all of this water away from the river to irrigation. And within days, the fish started dying. And over a 2-week period, there's estimates somewhere between 70,000, 100,000 adult Chinook salmon died. I remember sitting in the boat and I thought, I've got to do all I can to make sure this never happens again. And then my next thought was like, well, I'm going to law school, and that's it. It was the most, one of the biggest tragedies in all of Yurok history. But the silver lining was that it really was like the canary in the coal mine, kind of sounding the alarm that if we didn't change the way that things were done on the river, we were essentially going to kill the whole river. And so people started getting together and talking about how can we remove dams.
Bring the salmon home! Undam the planet! Bring the salmon home! We don't care! Undam the planet! Bring the salmon home! Undam the planet! Bring the salmon home! Undam the planet!
when you try to get your song, you go out on your own. You go by yourself. It has to be a desire inside you. It has to be a purpose that you have inside yourself. Nobody telling you that you need to go do this. This is something you do on your own. And so you'll come down here, like that creek over there. You go over there to the side of the creek and just sit there. And you just sit there and you think, and you be quiet. You be quiet. Like we are now. And you hear how the water hits that rock down there. You hear the little trickle. And you listen to the wind. You listen to the birds. And you just start singing a little bit. You start moving it, moving your voice with the water. And then you'll find your song. Being a salmon people, we depend on them, not just for food. They actually control our well-being. Fishing gave me so much. And when I was younger, we had a lot more salmon than we have now. And it made our family really tight. And over the years of my lifetime, I've seen how the abundance of salmon impacted our families and communities. And then right now, we don't have any right now. And there's a lot of our people that are suffering.
Nothing tonight, man.
So there are everything. It was a 30-year-long fight. And we're gonna see the fruits of that labor here next year. January of 2023, they're gonna start drawing the water levels down so that we can start deconstructing the dams.
We as a nation, if we don't sort of embrace that, like, rivers need water, salmon need water, and we have to put legitimate legal protections on in-stream flows for fish and that baseline ecological health for rivers, we're going to lose all of our salmon. That's an unacceptable outcome. If the salmon no longer exists, then we don't. You can't like have a fishing lifestyle if there's no fish, and we won't allow that to happen. The salmon people won't allow that to happen.
Hey, Yahweh, Yahweh, go. Hey, Yahweh, Yahweh, go. Ninny, hey, hey, Yahweh, Yahweh, go. While things have changed, they will change again. And that we will continue our sacred obligation to be those stewards, to love these places, to speak for the salmon, and to bring them back when the time comes. The work that you have done, you brought the salmon home. And in doing that, you have shown that all of us can do it. And we will do it, and we are doing it. That's what we're doing on the Klamath. Those dams are gonna come down in about 1.5 years. And we talk about the Elwha all the time, you know, and say things like, well, they did it, we're doing it. You know, in the law, they call that precedent, right? You set the precedent. So those dams will come down. And just like they're gonna come down on the Klamath, they're gonna come down on the Columbia, they're gonna come down on the Snake. And we will move through the salmon nations, removing these dams, because that's who we are and that's why we're here.
We're strong. We're very, very powerful. when all of the nations walk in together and everybody's saying the same thing. That's a message that is very powerful.
All of our Indigenous people were tied together through the salmon. We want to create a song for that, for all of our neighboring tribes all the way down, to really bring our people together and stand together and work together. When we make drums, we always have that prayer that wherever this drum is going, that gift of song goes with that drum too. Today, you know, this song that we're sharing comes from my son. The first part, hey, hey, oh, 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 hey. The second part, hey, hey, oh, oh, oh. How does that part go? See, it drops down. You guys catching it? Jefferson, got it? Jody?
Even though this old spider falls is sleeping over here, roar of the falls echoes in our heart.
I want to be able to fish that spot before I die. But if I can't do it, I want our children to be able to do it.
We have a responsibility to continue to fight in whatever way that we can.
It wasn't just about the fishing, it was about everything. It's about the culture, it's about the livelihood, it's about the environment, it's about the gratitude of that protection.
We're in this massive climate crisis. And the idea that you can just extract and pollute and consume without consequence is over. And I think the rest of the world is seeing that, and they're now looking to the salmon people to say, you know, what were the sort of grounding principles about how you interacted in balance with the natural world? And how can we apply those to get better environmental outcomes and to pull us out of this climate crisis? That's my hope, and that's where I think we're going in the future. And you know, the only thing is like, can we act fast enough? You know,
Wonderful. All right. We're now going to move to the Q&A section, and we are delighted to be also welcoming Jay Julius, who was not on the original program, to this. So two of the folks who are featured in the film, and then the filmmaker himself. I'm going to be fielding some questions. We've already had a few pour in, along with a whole bunch of really positive statements of loving the film, free the rivers. Paishka, and wanted to lead with that, so you all knew how it's being received by the folks who are unable to speak up on this webinar. And the first question that wanted to field to all of you is, Chairwoman Charles, Jay, Darrell, could you tell us about the significance of the film to you personally and why it matters so much at this moment?
But I hope, Francis, you can lead us and then we can follow you.
Okay. The film, first, I'd like to thank the children of the Seton for the production itself, and really appreciate to the fact of coming down and meeting with us and showing us the work that they have accomplished, not only here in the stateside, but international. It was really moving to see the ongoing product that they were producing to show and educate the world in general what the issues are in not only in our territories, but in other territories itself. It was something that's telling the story. It really relates on to our ancestors. I really am gratified for not only our ancestors, but all of the previous council members that had really moved forward with this to be sitting to where we're at now, but really identifying the product that we have produced forward with telling our story and the challenges that we had, but the unities that come together for Elwha, for Yurok, and many others out there that are unknown to us today. It's something that is in touching and brings back a lot of the memories of those that we had lost. We've had so many of our women and our leaders and our community and our future generations that we're looking forward to taking these steps. We started the footprints with our ancestors through that process. But it brings back a lot of the stories in general with what we used to have in the river before the dams, but also the history, the culture, the knowledge of bringing that forth with our elders in that process, because it brings back those memories. It also brings back the hurt. It also brings back the resistance of a lot of things that they had held within themselves for many generations, and having them come forward after they had seen the movie. And then just in general talking now that we're looking at having interviews more in tone with some more of our elders, some of our community, and really recognizing to the facts of the impacts that it had on our youth. To this day, the impacts that it has on our youth with our treaty rights and the things that they had to go through, and looking at the outcome of some of the younger generations to where they're at today, and the impacts that it had on their livelihood, on that part of it. So it brings back a lot of those memories. It brings back a lot of good things. Also, it brings back the protections of what we're all fighting for in the climates of today's society. But the beauty of what we are seeing that's moving forward with the river itself being free, 70 miles of river being free, but also the salmon that's returning, as you've seen in the video by Mick Henry in regards to the pink salmon that's starting to return. But not only in the river itself, outside of the river and the ocean, we're starting to see some of the livelihood of the seafood that is coming back, Dungeness crab, some of the eelgrass, and other things that are really important to the natural resources out there. I went down one time and seen over 30 eagles sitting at the river mouth, and it brings back that livelihood. It's bringing back and sharing some of the avenues of what was talked about that was considered a myth of reality to our communities, and bringing those stories that we were told when we were younger. But not only that, spiritually and culturally, we've identified in not only here, but even with Lummi and different avenues of the spiritual sensitivities that were imposed to us, and decisions that had to be made of our ancestral remains, or even the campsites that gave the history of how long we were on this river, for the years and the generations and thousands of years, and in some instincts of the stories that are being brought back forth from our elders, and talking about the meaning of the river to them, and it has a lot of history, and it's bringing back a lot of that to the livelihood of our community and the surrounding communities, because we had to be a partnership in a lot of this and the outreaches that we have taken. So I really raise my hands up to all of you for tonight and those that are listening, because it's something we want to share and educate and move forth for not only our own communities, but the surrounding communities, whether you're Native or non-Native, because there's so much more work to do. We have a lot more work to do here. That's it.
Alex, thank you. Thank you for bringing us together. You're always doing such great work out there, bringing a variety of people together, which I think is necessary. We all need this, and recognize the urgency that's needed for the future of salmon, for the future of salmon people and our culture and way of life. So thank you for that. Thank you to Joe. For me, there's this film offers so much for me personally, but I think for the, I don't know how many people are watching this now and watch this tonight. I think it's around 600, but for the 600 folks who are watching this, one of the things for me that I take from it is hope. Hope by example of great leadership, Frances and her council and her previous leaders, and that political will to fight, that ancient covenant, and never giving up and always seeing this outcome, gives hope to Amy, gives hope to the snake, gives hope to the Columbia. But what it is, and what this film shows all of us, the 600 people who are watching this right now, but also the ones who are going to watch it into the future, is one of the important things is what happened on the East Coast and what happened to the salmon on the East Coast, what happened to the rivers, the life of the rivers, the spirit of the rivers, the existence of salmon over there, and then Southern California, Sacramento River. What it does is gives us all hope. It gives the salmon hope. It gives the 30 eagles that Frances saw hope. It gives them a possibility of continuing to live. You heard Amy and Frances and many others in the film talk about covenant and ancient covenants. And Amy spoke of the animals were created first. The rivers were created first. We were last, but if the animals and the fish and the rivers and the trees could speak, the issue is not nature. As Oren Lyons said, there's not a wrench big enough to fix it. And oftentimes humans are looking for that wrench, but humanity's the problem. So I think from this film, one of the big things I take is that hope. And then Alex and Sierra Club and Joe and many other organizations who come together here tonight and have been coming together for myself the last decade, I think this brings the salmon hope. This brings what we call environmental work, climate change work. It brings hope, and it creates an urgency, a different perspective and philosophies that are going to get us to a better future. So that's just one of many things that this film does for me, and it tells a great story. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Alex, what's there for us at Children of the Setting Sun is that we see up and down the Pacific coast, the salmon people and the leaders that are bringing salmon home. And more often than not, they're the women, the grandmothers along these rivers, and the stories that they carry and the stories that they're willing to share with us we just wanted to take those stories and amplify them by bringing them together in a collection of stories. This is the beginning. And we're really here for that call for unity amongst all people for this work. As Francis is saying, there's a lot of work to do, and we know we can't do it alone. And so the stories that we're putting out there really is just a calling to tribal, non-tribal people that we need to get together. As Amy was saying, do we have enough time? Well, we do if we bring ourselves together and we provide leadership, and we provide hope that I think that time will be created. Groundswell will be created. Values will change if we just stick together and keep collecting these stories and getting out there together. So that's why I think this is an important first step for us to bring this out today. And in the future, you'll see us add to this story with another more stories to add to the collection, more invitations, I think, preferably not virtually, but just right alongside with us. The part of that film was shot in a place called Solano Falls Village. And we're going to move our gatherings around the Pacific coast, so we start including places like the Fraser River and the Sacramento River and the Snake River, so that this movement will include a lot more people with a lot more sense of urgency, that see that what we're doing and bringing the hearts together with the minds for this work. We have a belief that we got to balance it, but the spirit work with good science, and we have to balance that so that both the minds and hearts are working together.
Thank you all for those answers. That was great. I want to ask or put out there for the folks, we're getting a lot of interest on this chat or this Q&A rather. And just a reminder, it's down at the bottom of your screen if you wanted to submit a written question. And I'm just going to be scrolling through these here and trying my best. We are getting quite a few words of encouragement for all that's being said here. And a recurring theme that I just want to put out too. One, this is being recorded, which is great since we had over 1,500 folks who had expressed interest in attending tonight. So we're going to be able to send this out to everyone who's here and everyone who couldn't make it but registered. And then the other was a question of support. The first piece was what can be done by folks who have watched this and are interested in supporting the film, to be doing or to support Children of Setting Sun Productions in particular on this. And I've got some links that I'll put in the chat so everyone has that information. But the other question that's coming up is, and I'm hoping everyone might speak to this, is what does the support look like from the non-Indigenous community that can continue to be in favor of restoring rivers and removing dams? And you've all spoken to that a little bit, and curious to think, what could be done more? What does that allyship look like?
I think on our part of it is really identifying, telling the story more, really outreaching for what the needs are in regards to being successful the way we were, because it wasn't an easy task. I mean, I have to be honest on that part of it, but really doing the educational outreach, not only to the general public surrounding, but to the national and international educational communication bases that were there. But we've also developed curriculums for our schools, because we teach our language in the public schools where we have in Port Angeles School District area. So we helped educate some of our youth to do curriculums to help outreach to the elementary, middle school, high school, even the college levels now, to continue with our stories and to bring back a lot of the old stories that our elders had talked about. But we're looking at different funding sources that are needed for some of the studies that are ongoing. We do have a lot of the national and internationals that come over, scientists that come over and evaluate the flows of the river, from the insects all the way up to the species of the salmon runs and whatnot, and the projects that we're doing, that we co-manage, but also partner with different agencies out there. So we can get that to you and look at some of the accesses and the needs that we have on those parts of it. But it's just a continuing educational process.
Go ahead, yeah.
So I have a tendency to go back to ownership of a treaty, a marriage between two sovereigns, the immigrant sovereign and the sovereigns of this land. The salmon, the killer whales, the rivers, and how do we shift our philosophies and mind, our thinking around that? Not just nature, not just a beautiful place, but what it means for us. What does water mean to us as humans? And we can look at the past. We can look at the East Coast. We can look at Europe. We can look at what track and what trajectory we're on right now, and see the outcome. But from this film and from leadership like Elwha and Frances and her team and her leadership, and Amy and Yurok and many other successful victories out there, honoring those treaties and what the Indigenous stand up for and fight for, and taking ownership of it. It's not just an Indian thing. I'll speak for a treaty in general. It's not just an Indian thing. It's honor from both sides. So Alex, it's your treaty too. And what does honor mean to you? And not to just stand with the Indians and the Indian treaties, but change that a little bit and think about how we look at those as people, and how do we hold Murray? How do we hold Inslee? How do we hold Biden? How do we hold leadership accountable from our own skin, from our own personhood, in a different way? Not stand with the Indians, but stand on honor, stand on principle values in a commitment, a treaty, the supreme law of the land that your forefathers entered into, and it's your job to honor it. So I think shifting our thinking a little bit and taking a look at it from that perspective makes it easier to hold our leadership and electeds accountable. And then maybe, equally important, as I stated earlier, that the importance of free-flowing rivers. When the newcomers arrived here, this place was a perfect Eden. It was a perfect garden, and it took care of us. It took care of our families and our communities and our tribes since the beginning of time. See, sometimes we have a misunderstanding that we are the caretakers and we take care of, but what if we really look at it for what it is, and the fact that it's taken care of us for a long time? Now we're in trouble, and we need the urgency that leadership has done. One of the things that we've done, for example, with Woodland Park Zoo, is we did a salmon symposium with Indigenous from Russia. Alex, you were a part of that. Your team was there, and many others, and just coming together and sharing philosophies and coming together as one. And how do we move forward? Bringing in faith groups at that Woodland Park Zoo event. The 5 bishops of Washington State and the Archbishop signed a commitment. How does that affect Biden potentially, who is a Catholic as well? And really looking at it from a spiritual perspective as well, not just political, but how do we take it to a higher level and come together? And I think we're doing a good job right now. This is a prime example. Darrell's work at Setting Sun is a prime example of hope for the future.
Yeah, Alex, I think in following along with Frances and Jay, I would think that the invitation is to come and walk with us, both literally and figuratively. It's this walking together that we need to accomplish. We most often hear that people working in silos, So let's step out of that and let's work together. And that means coming to our community, being invited to yours, get to know each other on a real personal level. That connection of the heart must begin first. And then we could see what the belief systems that are within us that need to be shared, those good things about us as people can be learned. And then we can start from there in the work that we can do together. You know, it could be anything from a campsite for our next film shoot, or, you know, helping with our next gathering, or else helping you with yours, you know. That's how I see it, rather than say, well, you know, send money or, you know, come to the next thing. You know, it really needs to, I don't want 1,500 people showing up tomorrow. You know, we have to get organized and figure out how we can do this, but we're all pretty busy. The canoe journey's coming up this year. There'll be multiple stops along that way that we'll be out filming. We'll be at Lower Elwha with Francis. So we'll be with Lummi and following the people down to Muckleshoot this year. And along the way, those stories get told. A lot gets shared. You know, a lot of things that are in our histories get brought out, and a whole heck of a lot of gratitude, which I think we all need more of. So that's my invitation. That's something that I think we could really begin to do together.
And I really want to piggyback off of what Darrell has said about the land. I mean, you can read books and you can see things and the videos and whatnot, but walking the land itself is very powerful. Walking along the river banks itself is very powerful in many ways, and it's really important to the factors of having that visual and having the feel of the nature of what's there and what's coming on those parts of it, because it's not just the river, it's the livelihood of the animals and the trees, and everything we walk on is our medicine. It's traditional and cultural values to us. May not mean much to others, but it does mean a lot to us. And we want to be able to share some of that. Thank you.
Thank you all for those words. I think the next question I'm going to go to here might be coming to you, Darrell. The film does an excellent job of centering not just Indigenous leaders, of course, but also female leaders. Can you speak to that choice?
Well, it came about at Salilo when we recognized a number of gatherings taking place, and they were all men. And we felt that there needs to be a balance, you know. And we put that together and brought the women leaders together to open our work, because that's who we come from. We come from our mothers and Mother Earth. And we felt that really is the way we set the tone for our work, is to remember where we come from and how sacred that is. And it's a sacred obligation to recognize that every day and give thanks to the mother every day. So that was the initial thought on the women's circle, and the stories that got brought out were really important, because Francis and Amy and some of the Shelley Boyd, and they shared their stories with the younger ones there, who were just on the edge of their seat listening to these words of wisdom and informing that next generation on the work that has to continue. So that's why we did that.
Thank you for that. And I think that might be a good pivot over to Francis. I have a question for you about just about the Elwha. Obviously, this is a river that has become synonymous for so many of us who care about salmon and river restoration, with a story of hope and success. And wanted to get from you maybe to say a little bit more about what it felt like when the dams began to come down, and what it's felt like in the decades since, and what you would suggest to other folks to keep them hopeful, which was another question we got in this chat.
Wow. It was powerful. I mean, there was really no words that could express for what we were feeling emotionally. I mean, being able to try to compose ourselves when that had occurred, and watching the the happiness of our elders. I mean, all of those before I took the seat that I am in now, having the stories being told and really listening and looking at the material for what was the fourth of the minutes on the challenges that a lot of our previous council had, a lot of how the councils were formed and the treaty rights that was being mistreated in all kinds of aspects. But going back to a lot of that history and listening to the elders talk about their stories was very powerful. I mean, I really took into granted for a lot of that and sitting down with them. I know with like Hazel Sampson, when she passed, she was 105. And B. Charles, who went back to Washington, D.C. and did the testimony and congressional levels. And they were women that went back to D.C. and thinking of all of the tasks and the journeys and the challenges that they had, because in those times, the people would go door to door to get the resources to go back and fight in D.C. I mean, going back and listening and thinking about those thoughts and having those memories of what was being told. I mean, Ben Charles did a beautiful job of opening up and having the prayers of where there was eagles that were soaring above us when those dams were, the first dam was in the process of being taken down. The ceremonies of the people and Billy Frank that was there and having those moments and the governor and all the congressional and the senators and a lot of the other communities in general, but the children, it was really the children that set the motion of looking at them back then to where we are today on how they had grown and the challenges that they were faced with in their selves and seeing that. But it was the elders and the children that really set the tone and the dignitaries that were there and having that opportunity. It was really hard to be able to sit there and compose because it meant a lot. I mean, this was something of the challenge and for our people for 100 years and having those words given to us time and time again, saying it wouldn't happen. But in many lifetimes, it didn't happen for a lot of our elders that really fought the fight for our protection of our land and for the protection of our salmon. But knowing what the achievements of it was to bring it forth to protect the salmon and bring them back for our future generations, to see the smokehouses come back and having that a salmon bacon and bring a lot of the livelihood back. I mean, it was really emotional. Having conversations with our elders and thinking of them today, that with so many of them that had passed on, and thanking the previous council individuals that really set those footprints for us and being gratified for where I was at when that time come, having the opportunity with the other council members and those that are still on council today. It's something that it really was speechless in many ways and it still is today. I mean, but being able to share what we know today, what we were challenged with back then, to be able to share that, like with Amy and so many other nations out there, because there is so much more that we need to bring forth on that part of it.
Powerful. Thank you. This question is for everybody, and it's a blend of a few questions here, but some folks have been writing in from parts of the country where there's more disputes around dam removal and more of the people who, like you said, Francis, that are saying no over and over again for years. How do you suggest and how do you personally engage in the discussions around pushing back with people who disagree or people who want to see the dams kept in place? And what does that work look like?
I think on our parts of it, I mean, even within ourselves, there was disputes at times in regards to the betterment of how we move forward with the generations and the generation gaps that had taken place. It was an educational process that we had to start within ourselves, but also start working to the outside and find out who those individuals were, who the organizations were, the governmental parts of it, the local government parts of it, and then building committees and having the outreach that we had to have to educate everybody of the pros and the cons and be able to sit around the table to have those discussions. I mean, they were very hard discussions to have, but to know what the give and take was going to be, because it was something that everybody had to collaborate together and be unified on one way or the other. But just in general, really outreaching to a lot of the organizations. The tribes really did a major play in this for the communication basis with it of what we were trying to accomplish, because it did not only impact us as natives, it had a heavy impact on those all surrounding with the non-nations and non-natives out there just as well. But it come to understanding the process, understanding the loss of the power, what it was generating, understanding the loss of the jobs, but again, what it was generating for the natural resources environments of it just as much. So communication, education, sitting around the table and having a discussion, hard discussions, having public forums, and not only in the reservation area, but outside the reservation area, and continuing to go back to Washington, D.C. and get support in that manner, but really getting support from a lot of the nations and the non-nations that were out there. It's a challenge. I mean, but you have to come together and be unified one way or the other. And the tribes came together and was unified with us.
Awesome.
Jay and Darrell, could I pitch that same question to you? What do you two think about how, what does it mean to engage with the people who say no?
Yeah, what Francis said is spot on. That's a similar approach we take.
Perfect. All right. The next question I wanted to ask was, Darrell, I'm gonna quote you in this Q&A for a minute, and you've called this film a contribution in the movement towards dam removal, and I think it's, as everybody who's on here would agree, a really amazing step towards that. And I'm curious what's coming next for you. What's the rest of the Salmon People Project look like? And then also for Francis and Jay, I'd be curious in hearing, you know, what is next on your dockets in terms of the fight for salmon.
Yeah, for your friends, Alex, we have what we call the Salmon People Project. And in that project, we have actually 3 parts to it. We're committed to gathering the salmon people on an annual basis. We were at Salado last year. We're working really hard with Yurok to bring the gathering down to their territory and celebrate their victory. And as we talk so much about those that have gone on before us, bring those names back so we could properly recognize them. Amy says that quite often, the people that she's following, well, we want to find out who they are and recognize them, not just for there, but other parts of our Coast Salish territory and north to Canada. We need to stand those people up that have been doing the hard work over a long period of time and recognize them and honor them and show them as an example to the next generation on this manner of being that is bringing our lifeway back to our people. So I think that's really important work. So there's that. We have research that we're conducting as we go along. We conduct research as part of a project with Western Washington University Psychology Department around the questions of identity and what does that mean to us as Native people. So we're doing that. And then the collection of stories that we're committed to over the longer period of time, perhaps 3 or 4 years, and we'll visit the Fraser River, we'll visit Snake and Columbia, Elwha, and Klamath. You know, what's not being said, and Francis is so humble, what they're really saying is that when you bring the river back to life, there's this other life that is just beaming there now. And you talk to Francis's people there, like they're counting not only the amount of salmon coming back, but otter and shellfish and deer. when we were there, they were counting the amount of cougars that have come back because the whole ecosystem's being brought back to life. And I think that's the real beauty of the stories that they carry, is that they're all life givers, you know, and we want to be part of that. We want to be able to share these stories and bring them into the classroom so that the young people know that they have a role to play in this manner of giving life to all living things. So that's what we're up to. And these things change. It could be dams today. It could be other things that people are doing with pipelines or coal ports or those big fights that people are engaged in for the long term. But we want to tell their story.
Francis, do you want to go or?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think there's anywhere we go, any fight we engage in to protect, to defend, to ensure a future, there's always going to be opposition. And as far as dam removal and people who say no, or, you know, they should stay, that's okay. I think it's focusing on the yes, it's focusing on those who understand or who are on the fence, or the youth who don't really have a complete understanding of the degradation, their future, and what it holds if we continue down this path, no longer a free-flowing river. And this is where I think some of the projects that we're working on right now at Cecilia is telling that story of the spirit of the river, and how do we get Alex to be invited back. I'm not saying you're not, Alex, but I'm just saying the broader community, or a culture, or a culture that's been severed wherever it originated from being one with nature, from believing that everything's got a spirit, everything's interconnected. And as Amy and many others have stated, that everything that's going extinct before our eyes and on our watch right now was here long before us and serves a great purpose. And so what does that mean? So getting that question out there for us to ask ourselves, and maybe explore different ways of looking at nature, and from a relationship standpoint versus a resource. And so back to the last question also, I just encourage you to continue to move forward and tell your story. Don't allow someone to shift the narrative or instill fear in you for doing what you feel is right. There's always going to be opposition to whatever fight you're engaged in, and that's okay. It's okay, because it creates a good debate. It creates good conversation, and I don't think the objective's to get them to yes. The objective's to get the story out, continue that fight, build that momentum, and especially get youth standing with you and being a voice, because it's their future at stake.
Yeah, and not only that, with what we have going on here, it's not only Elwha that we're working on. We're working on some of the creeks along our UNA usual and custom areas that we have our natural resources crew and staff that are working on. With the Elwha, we're getting some log jams in for the protections of the salmon as they're getting prepared to do their spawning grounds, and so we have a lot of work that we're accomplishing on the river itself, and having the opportunity of seeing it change in the seasons that it does, and getting the rivers set so that we're prepared for a long haul burning back the salmon. But we're also working on some of the smaller tributaries of our creeks and our areas, so that we have some of the salmon coming back in the smaller creek areas that are really harmed in different ways, because it's impacted with the land environment itself, to where it doesn't have a mouth of the entrance in the low tides and things like that, and contaminated areas just as well, that has an impact on our harbors and some of the other territories in our usual custom areas that we have. So those are some of the projects that we're continuing to work on. But it's still the education. Yes, we're going to have a lot of people that will say no, and it's just continuing on with the education, walking that path with them to try to educate them. Of course, there are some people that will be able to work with and change their minds on it, but really it's just outreach into the younger generations to tone them into what their accomplishments will be in their futures and what they have to look for the future generations of them. So it's an ongoing project. It's an everyday project that we're faced with, and it's something that we can't forget about.
Thanks for that. I think a few of the things that you all said are really sticking out around the power of story and communicating these stories, and just the tireless work of continuing to put it out there. And I just wanted to share a question that was asked to me in the chat, but I think is one that I would also like to offer to other folks to take as well. And it was to be sure that Ben Jealous, who's the new executive director of Sierra Club, sees this film if he's not already. And I think that's a great idea, and I will be sure to do that and then also spread it farther. And I wanted to address some of the other questions around how folks can watch this film, and it is available on YouTube. So after the showing today, we will be sending around a follow-up email along with all the links and a recording of this and everything else that you might need that hopefully was addressed in this Q&A to make sure that you have it. And I think the piece I would ask is, in the same vein of that question, I would ask everybody here to help spread the word that's in the film and help continue to get a new audience and get new eyes on this so that they can see the power of the story that you all got to be a part of tonight. And so I'll say a thank you once again to everybody else who's been on this, and then turn it over to Darrell, Jay, Francis for the last word, if you have anything.
We'll have Francis can go first, and then I'll close.
We really raise our hands up to Children of the Setting Sun for their productions and the outreach that they continue to do, not only to help educate our surrounding areas, but I really want to thank you, Darrell, for allowing us to share this into our public school settings, because there was an outreach of 1,000 teachers that it went to in our area here. But the ongoing tasks that we have on that one, and Amy, I mean, really with the challenges and the power that she has dealing with the Klamath, and we're looking forward to being able to go there and really celebrate with them when that progress is starting, because it's reality. It's something that's really reality for the people. And don't give up that hope. Don't forget the prayers, and really believe in the Creator, because I tell you, it's something that's very powerful in its own way. But with you, Alex, and everybody else, for the singing that went on beforehand, before we started, with those prayers that come in heart, we really praise for the outreach for that. And those that are generally watching right now, our hands really go up to you too, because we want to continue educating and continue answering those questions, and available, like Darrell said, we're available to meet with you, set up a schedule or something like that, because we are all busy just as much, and our crew would be more than happy to share some of their experiences and tell their stories that have been out on the river, and the progress that they're making, and the successes that we're seeing with the salmon return itself. And we're looking forward to seeing the smokehouses come forth for our people, and really bringing our youth back together to be able to tell their story of what they have experienced, just as much for their futures to come. So my hands go up to all of you, Hotnets, and thank you.
I just want to say thank you to everyone here tonight. Thank you to those who watch us in the future, and thank you to Darrell, Setting Sun Productions, for getting the story out there. Francis, Amy, givers of life. The rivers are givers of life. The salmon are givers of life. The greatest example of giving their life for future generations. The southern resident killer whales, the killer whales in general that are starving because of this conversation around dams. The river struggling to survive is all part of the starvation. and all the salmon people and the connection to salmon and our ability to exist. That's a big part of what this fight is about, and a lot of what you don't hear about, a lot of speaking about salmon, for the rivers, for the killer whales, but really, Francis, Amy, the salmon people, it's about our existence too, because without salmon, we cease to exist as a salmon people, and there's an urgency here. So, and we can only do this together. All of us, doesn't matter whether we're Indigenous from here or wherever we're from, we have to do this together. So thank you to everyone for taking part in this, and thank you for your fight. And whether small or big, we need lots of little things being done to make a big difference. So thank you to everyone for the work you're doing. Aishka.
First off, I'd like to have Jordan and Tim come and stick their heads in behind us, because they're our behind the scenes people. They come here. Jordan's our main producer director, and Tim's our charge of our marketing communications, and they're here just lending support. Tim didn't stick his head in there, but thanks to everybody, Francis and Alex especially, thank you. And Amy, she'll hopefully see the recording. And open invitation, we're going to show the film in Olympia at the Capitol Theater. The date's still coming together. It'll be the end of March, I think. But we have a newsletter, we have our website, and we'll be updating that. If you want to share that with other people in person, hopefully Francis and Jay and Amy can be there in person for time with state legislators and state agency people and tribal leaders from that area to bring them into the fold. We also have a book coming out from UW Press, April 17th at the UW Intellectual House. Another opportunity to get together and share ideas and build forces around the work. So I'll be seeing hopefully a lot of you soon, and we'll continue this conversation and build our army for the next battle we're going to engage this year and beyond. So thank you. Aishka.
Thank you all for attending. The link to the full film is now in the chat, and look forward to working with you more in the future. Have a good night.
Aishka.
Thank you.